Lily Zephyr's delicate hands trembled as she tucked the folded piece of paper deeper into her apron pocket, her heart pounding wildly against her ribs like a caged bird seeking freedom. The weight of the Cowboy's hastily scrawled words, "Run to me tonight," felt heavier than all the dishes she'd scrubbed in the 5 years since her parents' death had left her at the mercy of her uncle's family. Arizona Territory, 1878, was no place for a woman alone, especially in a place like Agua Caliente where the desert heat matched the temperaments of those who'd settled there. At 22, Lily had endured enough cruelty from her father's brother and his bitter wife to recognize that her one chance at escape had just been slipped to her alongside the money paid for supplies at Henderson's general store. The cowboy Ethan Calloway, they called him, had looked at her with eyes that promised something she'd nearly forgotten existed: kindness. He'd noticed the fading bruise on her cheek that her aunt had given her 3 days prior for burning the bread. Noticed how she kept her gaze downcast when her uncle barked orders. Noticed that she was treated worse than the hired hands who at least received pay for their labor. As Lily loaded supplies into her uncle's wagon, she contemplated the enormity of what Ethan was offering. Freedom. But at what cost? And could she trust a man she barely knew beyond the polite nods they'd exchanged during his visits to town? "Girl, stop dawdling." Uncle Vernon's voice cut through her thoughts like a whip. "We got 5 miles to cover before sundown." Lily nodded quickly, her face a practiced mask of submission. "Yes, sir." She climbed onto the wagon beside him, her fingers secretly touching the note in her pocket as if to reassure herself it wasn't a figment of her desperate imagination. The journey back to the ranch was torturous. Each rotation of the wheels brought her closer to a decision that would determine the course of her life. Uncle Vernon, a hard-faced man with a permanent grimace etched into his leathery skin, spoke little. His silence was a mercy. His words, when they came, were rarely kind. The Zephyr family ranch had once belonged partially to Lily's father, Jonathan, before pneumonia claimed both him and his wife within a week of each other. The grief had barely settled when Vernon and his wife Martha made it clear that Lily would earn her keep or find herself without a roof. What had begun as helping with chores rapidly descended into servitude. The 3 Zephyr cousins, all older than Lily, treated her as little more than hired help, with Martha's encouragement. "Take the supplies to the kitchen," Uncle Vernon ordered as they arrived. "Then see to the mending," Martha set aside. "The boys need their shirts fixed before roundup." "Yes, sir," Lily said, her voice soft but her thoughts racing. If she ran tonight, what would she take? Where exactly would she meet Ethan? The note hadn't specified, only instructed her to come to the edge of Blackwell Creek after moonrise. The kitchen was mercifully empty when she entered. Martha was likely visiting with the pastor's wife in town, a weekly ritual that involved more gossip than godliness. Lily quickly unloaded the supplies, her mind calculating how much time remained before nightfall. 6 hours, perhaps. 6 hours to decide if she would risk everything on the word of a cowboy with kind eyes and a gentle smile. As she worked through the afternoon, mending shirts with tiny, precise stitches, memories of Ethan floated through her mind. He'd started appearing at Henderson's whenever she was sent to town, always finding a reason to speak with her, however briefly. Last week, he'd helped her lift a sack of flour into the wagon while Vernon was occupied at the bank. "No one should treat you like they do," he'd whispered, his voice so low she'd wondered if she'd imagined it. Martha returned as the sun began its descent, sweeping into the kitchen with a critical eye for any task left undone. "The pastor's wife says the Calloway outfit is hiring more hands," she announced to no one in particular as Lily prepared supper. Apparently, they're expanding their operation. Vernon should speak with old man Calloway about grazing rights before it becomes an issue. Lily's heart skipped. The Calloways. That was Ethan's family. That youngest Calloway boy was in town again, Martha continued, watching Lily with narrow eyes. Odd how often he's there when you are. Lily kept her face carefully neutral. I wouldn't know, madam. I'm focused on the errands Uncle Vernon assigns. Martha's lips pressed into a thin line. See that you stay focused. Pretty girls with no prospects can get foolish notions. The warning was clear, but it came too late. The notion was already there, rooted in Lily's heart like a seed waiting for rain. Supper was a tense affair. Vernon complained about cattle prices while his sons Thomas, Albert, and Samuel discussed the upcoming cattle drive. No one addressed Lily directly except to request more food or coffee. It was as if she were a ghost haunting her own home, visible only when useful. Clear up and wash the dishes, Martha instructed as the men retired to the porch. Then mend those socks in my basket before bed. Lily nodded, calculating furiously. The moon would rise in 3 hours. The creek was a mile's walk, if she waited until Martha and Vernon retired. The house grew quiet as the evening stretched on. Vernon and Martha went to bed at their usual time, followed by the boys returning from the bunkhouse where they'd been playing cards with the ranch hands. Lily finished the last sock, her fingers aching from the long day's work, and quietly made her way to the small room in the attic that had been allocated to her after her parents' death. Once alone, she moved with quiet determination. From beneath a loose floorboard, she retrieved the few treasures she'd managed to keep. Her mother's silver hairbrush, a small portrait of her parents, and a modest sum of money saved from the rare occasions when someone slipped her a coin for an extra service. Into a small bundle went her spare dress, undergarments, and the photograph. The rest she would leave behind. Lily waited, counting the minutes, listening to the creaks and sighs of the old house as it settled for the night. When the grandfather clock in the parlor chimed 11, she knew it was time. The moon would be high enough to light her way to the creek. With trembling fingers, she changed into her sturdiest dress and boots. She tied her long auburn hair back with a ribbon, wrapped her mother's shawl around her shoulders, and clutched her small bundle. Then, with one last look at the tiny room that had been her prison and sanctuary, she slipped down the back stairs, careful to avoid the steps that creaked. The night air carried the scent of sage and dust as Lily crept past the bunkhouse. A dog barked in the distance, but none of the ranch dogs stirred a stroke of luck she took as a sign. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared it might wake the entire household, but she pressed on, past the barn, through the corral, and into the expanse of open land that led to Blackwell Creek. The moon painted the landscape in silver, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for her as she walked. Every rustle in the brush, every call of a night bird made her jump. What if this was a cruel joke? What if Ethan wasn't there? What if Uncle Vernon discovered her absence before she was safely away? These thoughts threatened to overwhelm her until the sound of running water reached her ears. Blackwell Creek wasn't much more than a stream, but in the Arizona Territory, any reliable water source was a landmark. As she approached the willow trees that lined the bank, a figure emerged from the shadows. Ethan Calloway stood beside 2 saddled horses, his tall frame unmistakable even in the moonlight. Relief flooded through Lily so intensely that her knees nearly buckled. "You came," he said, his voice a mixture of surprise and joy. Lily nodded, suddenly shy now that the moment of decision was upon her. "I didn't know if I should." Ethan stepped closer, his face earnest in the moonlight. "I've been watching how they treat you, Miss Zephyr. No one deserves to live as you have been. I'm offering you a way out, a job at my family's ranch as a housekeeper, properly paid and respected. My mother needs the help, and you need escape." "But why would you help me?" Lily asked, the question that had plagued her all day finally finding voice. Ethan's expression softened. "Because from the first time I saw you in town, carrying packages twice your size without complaint while your uncle did nothing to help, I knew you had a strength that deserved better circumstances." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "And because no one else was going to do it." The sincerity in his voice reached something in Lily that had been closed off for years. A tear slipped down her cheek, not of sorrow, but of profound relief. Someone had seen her. Someone had cared enough to act. "We need to ride quickly," Ethan continued, gesturing to the horses. "Your uncle has friends in town who might spot you. We'll head to our north pasture tonight. By morning, we'll be at the main house. My family is expecting us." "Your family knows about me?" Lily asked, suddenly concerned. "They know I'm bringing someone who needs help," Ethan explained as he took her bundle and secured it to one of the saddles. "My parents aren't the sort to turn away someone in need. They'll welcome you." Lily hesitated only a moment longer before allowing Ethan to help her mount. The horse beneath her shifted, sensing her nervousness, but Ethan's steady hand on the bridle kept the animal calm. "Have you ridden before?" he asked, his eyes concerned in the moonlight. "Yes, though not for years," Lily admitted. "My father taught me." Ethan nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Follow me closely. The path can be tricky in places, but these horses know the way." With that, he swung into his own saddle and urged his mount forward. Lily followed, the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath her both familiar and strange after so long. As they rode away from Blackwell Creek, away from the Zephyr Ranch, away from 5 years of servitude and pain, something unfurled in Lily's chest, a sensation so foreign that it took her several miles to recognize it. Hope. They rode in silence through the night, the desert landscape transforming around them as they left the valley and moved into more rugged terrain. Occasionally, Ethan would glance back, checking that Lily was managing, offering an encouraging smile when their eyes met. "We'll rest the horses at the ridge," he called back as a line of darker shadow appeared on the horizon. "There's water there, and we can take a brief break before continuing." Lily nodded, grateful for the prospect of stretching her legs. The excitement and fear of escape had initially masked her fatigue, but hours in the saddle were taking their toll on muscles long unused to riding. When they reached the ridge, Ethan helped her dismount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through Lily, one that had nothing to do with exertion. "Thank you," she murmured, embarrassed by her reaction. Ethan simply smiled, then busied himself with the horses, leading them to a small spring that bubbled from the rocks. Lily took the opportunity to splash cool water on her face and drink deeply, the clean taste washing away the dust of travel. "We're making good time," Ethan said, offering her a piece of jerky from his saddlebag. "We should reach the north pasture before dawn. Our line cabin there will give you a safe place to rest before we continue to the main ranch." Lily accepted the food, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. "Won't they search for me?" she asked, the fear she'd been suppressing rising again. Ethan's expression darkened. "Vernon might, once he realizes you've gone, but he won't look to our ranch first. There's no reason for him to connect your disappearance with me." He hesitated, then added more gently, "And even if he does, my father won't turn you over. The Calloways stand by their own." "But I'm not one of yours," Lily pointed out, the jerky forgotten in her hand. Ethan's gaze held hers, steady and certain. "You are now." The simple declaration settled over Lily like a blanket, warm and protective. For the first time since her parents' death, someone was claiming her as family, even if only in the sense of protection. She blinked back tears and focused on eating, not trusting her voice. They rested only long enough for the horses to recover before mounting again. The remaining journey to the north pasture passed in a dreamlike state for Lily, her mind floating between exhaustion, exhilaration, and fear. By the time a small cabin appeared in the pre-dawn light, she was swaying slightly in the saddle. Ethan was at her side instantly, helping her down with a concerned frown. "You're done in," he observed. "Let's get you inside." The line cabin was simple but clean, with a stone fireplace, a table with chairs, and two narrow beds against opposite walls. Ethan quickly built a fire to ward off the pre-dawn chill, then fetched water from the nearby stream while Lily sank gratefully onto one of the beds. "I'll make coffee," he said upon returning, moving efficiently around the small space. "There's food in the stores, nothing fancy, but it'll keep us going until we reach the main house." Lily watched him work, struck by the contrast between this man and the men of her uncle's household. Ethan moved with purpose, but without the harsh demands or cutting words that characterized Vernon and his sons. He brought her coffee without expecting immediate thanks, provided food without reminding her of her indebtedness. As the sun began to rise, casting golden light through the cabin's single window, Lily felt her eyelids growing impossibly heavy. The emotional and physical toll of the night was catching up with her. "Sleep," Ethan said gently, noticing her struggle to stay awake. "We're safe here and you need rest. I'll keep watch and wake you when it's time to continue." Lily meant to protest, to insist that she was fine, but the soft bed and the security of Ethan's presence overcame her resistance. She was asleep almost before she could remove her boots. When she woke, sunlight streamed through the window, indicating it was well past morning. Panic seized her for a moment. She was late for chores. Martha would be furious before memory returned. She wasn't at the Zephyr ranch anymore. She was free. Ethan sat at the table, cleaning a rifle with practiced movements. He looked up at her stirring and smiled. "Good afternoon." "Afternoon." Lily sat up, alarmed. "How long did I sleep?" "About 6 hours," Ethan replied, setting aside the rifle. "You needed it. There's stew warming if you're hungry." Lily's stomach answered before she could, growling loudly enough to bring a blush to her cheeks. Ethan laughed, the sound warm and rich as he ladled stew into a bowl for her. "We'll head out in about an hour," he explained as she ate. "That'll get us to the main ranch by supper. My family will be expecting us." Lily nodded, still marveling at how completely her life had changed in the span of a day. Yesterday morning, she'd been scrubbing floors and dreading another endless day of servitude. Now she sat in a cabin miles from that life, with a man who looked at her as if she mattered. "Why did you notice me?" she asked suddenly, the question escaping before she could consider its propriety. Ethan's expression softened, a hint of color touching his tanned cheeks. "I noticed you the first time I saw you in Henderson's, struggling with those heavy flour sacks while your uncle chatted with the men. You had a look about you determined, even though your hands were shaking with effort." He paused, seeming to search for the right words, but it was more than that. "Each time I came to town after that, I'd see how they treated you, and something inside me couldn't stand by and watch anymore. But why help me escape? You could have just been kind when we met in town." "Because kindness in passing wasn't going to change your situation," Ethan said simply. "And because I believe God puts people in our path for a reason. You needed help, and I was in a position to give it." His eyes, blue as the Arizona sky, met hers directly. "I don't expect anything from you, Miss Zephyr. My mother genuinely needs help with the house, and you'll be paid fair wages for your work. What you do after that is entirely your choice." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to Lily's eyes. Choice such a simple concept, yet one that had been denied her for so long. She swallowed hard, nodding her understanding and gratitude when words failed her. They departed the line cabin as the afternoon began to wane, riding at a more leisurely pace than their midnight flight. Ethan pointed out landmarks as they traveled, teaching Lily about the Calloway ranch lands and the surrounding countryside. It was the most anyone had spoken directly to her in years, and Lily drank in both the information and the respect with which it was delivered. The main house of the Calloway ranch appeared as they crested a gentle hill, a sprawling, two-story structure of wood and stone, with a wide veranda wrapping around its front. Outbuildings dotted the landscape around it. A large barn, bunkhouses for the hands, a cookhouse, and various smaller structures whose purposes Lily could only guess at. The entire complex spoke of prosperity and permanence, so different from her uncle's struggling operation. As they approached, figures emerged onto the veranda. A tall man Lily assumed was Ethan's father, a woman who must be his mother, and two younger men who bore a striking resemblance to Ethan. The Calloway family assembled to greet them. Anxiety clutched at Lily's throat. What if they didn't approve of her? What if they resented Ethan bringing a stranger into their home? "It'll be all right," Ethan said softly, as if reading her thoughts. "My family has been expecting you. They want to help." Before Lily could respond, they were riding into the yard, and Ethan was dismounting, then reaching up to assist her. Her legs felt wobbly after the long ride, but she stood as tall as she could, determined to make a good impression. "Son," the older man called, descending the porch steps. His resemblance to Ethan was unmistakable, though his hair was silver rather than Ethan's dark brown. "Glad to see you made it safely." "Pa," Ethan greeted, keeping a supportive hand at Lily's elbow. "This is Miss Lily Zephyr. Miss Zephyr, my father, James Calloway." "Welcome to our home, Miss Zephyr," Mr. Calloway said, his voice kind but his eyes assessing as they took in her simple dress and exhausted appearance. "Thank you, sir," Lily managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm grateful for your hospitality." The woman had joined them by now, her face lined with years but her eyes the same blue as Ethan's, warm with welcome. "I'm Sarah Calloway," she said, reaching for Lily's hands. "We're so pleased you've come to help us. The house has gotten beyond my management since my arthritis worsened." The simple kindness in Mrs. Calloway's voice and touch nearly undid Lily's composure. She blinked rapidly, determined not to cry in front of these people who were already showing her more kindness than she'd known in years. "Boys," Mr. Calloway called to the younger men, "take care of the horses. Ethan, bring Miss Zephyr's things. Sarah, I expect our guest could use a hot bath and a proper meal before anything else." The family moved with practiced efficiency, following Mr. Calloway's instructions without question or complaint. Lily found herself whisked into the house and up to a bedroom that Mrs. Calloway explained would be hers. "It's not fancy," the older woman said apologetically, "but it's clean and private. The washroom is through that door. I'll have the boys bring up hot water for your bath. There are dresses in the wardrobe that might suit you until we can get to town for proper measurements." Lily stood in the center of the room, overwhelmed. The space was 3 times the size of her attic room at the Zephyr Ranch, with a real bed, a dressing table, a wardrobe, and even a small bookshelf filled with volumes. A colorful quilt covered the bed, and curtains framed a window that overlooked the ranch yard. "This is for me?" she asked, unable to comprehend such luxury. Mrs. Calloway's expression softened with understanding and perhaps a hint of sadness. "Yes, dear. This is your room for as long as you choose to stay with us." She patted Lily's arm gently. Rest now. Supper will be in 2 hours, but no one will think poorly of you if you're too tired to join us tonight." Left alone, Lily sank onto the edge of the bed, touching the quilt with reverent fingers. The reality of her escape began to settle upon her, bringing with it a wave of emotion so powerful she could no longer hold back her tears. She wept silently, for the years of hardship, for the parents she had lost, for the cruelty she had endured, and for the unexpected kindness of strangers who owed her nothing. By the time the promised bath water arrived, delivered by Ethan's brothers with respectful nods and no intrusive questions, Lily had composed herself. She soaked in the hot water until it began to cool, washing away the dust of travel and, it seemed, the lingering touch of her past life. In the wardrobe, she found several dresses that were clearly hand-me-downs but of far better quality than anything she'd worn in years. She selected a simple blue cotton dress that required only minor adjustments to fit her smaller frame, grateful for Mrs. Calloway's thoughtfulness. When she descended the stairs for supper, it was with her head held higher than it had been in years. The Calloway family welcomed her to their table without ceremony, including her in their conversations as naturally as if she'd always been among them. Ethan's brothers Daniel and Joseph teased each other and occasionally their older brother, but their humor never had the cruel edge that characterized the Zephyr boys' interactions. Throughout the meal, Lily found her gaze drawn repeatedly to Ethan, who sat across from her. He spoke little but seemed content to listen to his family's chatter, his eyes frequently meeting hers with a warmth that caused her cheeks to flush. After the meal, Mr. Calloway addressed the matter of her presence directly. "Miss Zephyr, Ethan has explained something of your situation to us. I want you to know that you're welcome here as long as you wish to stay. We can offer you a position as housekeeper with fair wages and respect for your work. And your privacy," Mrs. Calloway added. "We've no intention of prying into your past unless you choose to share it." "Vernon Zephyr has a reputation in these parts," Mr. Calloway continued, his expression darkening. "Not a good one. If he comes looking for you, he'll find no welcome here." Lily's throat tightened with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you," she managed. "No thanks needed," Mr. Calloway said firmly. "We judge people by their actions, not their circumstances. Ethan says you're a hard worker who's been dealt a poor hand. That's enough for us." That night, as Lily lay in a real bed for the first time in years, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Calloway ranch settling for the night, she allowed herself to contemplate the future. Not just survival, which had been her only goal for so long, but perhaps something more. Something that included the quiet cowboy with kind eyes who had risked his father's good name and his own safety to offer her escape. For the first time since her parents' death, Lily Zephyr fell asleep with hope in her heart. The first week at the Calloway ranch passed in a blur of new experiences for Lily. Mrs. Calloway proved to be a patient teacher, showing Lily the rhythms of the household without the cutting criticism that had characterized Martha's instruction. The work was substantial. A ranch this size generated enormous amounts of laundry, cooking, and cleaning, but it was shared work, not the solitary servitude Lily had known. Ethan was often absent during daylight hours, his responsibilities taking him to far corners of the sprawling ranch. Yet Lily would occasionally look up from hanging laundry or sweeping the veranda to find him watching her from horseback, a smile touching his lips before he continued on his way. In the evenings, the family gathered for supper, followed by time spent in the parlor where Joseph often played the piano while Daniel read aloud from newspapers or novels. Mr. Calloway smoked his pipe, and Mrs. Calloway worked on her mending. Ethan usually sat quietly, occasionally contributing to the conversation, but seeming content to observe. Lily, initially uncertain of her place in these gatherings, found herself gradually included, asked for her opinion on the news Daniel read, complimented on a dish she'd prepared, invited to join in when the family sang along with Joseph's playing. Small kindnesses freely given that began to heal wounds she'd barely acknowledged on the 8th day. As Lily hung sheets on the line behind the house, she became aware of someone approaching. Turning, she found Ethan standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. "Good morning, Miss Zephyr," he greeted, a touch of nervousness in his usually confident demeanor. "I hope I'm not interrupting your work." "Not at all, Mr. Calloway," Lily replied, her cheeks warming at his formal address. They had developed a careful politeness with each other, neither acknowledging the intimacy of their midnight flight from her uncle's ranch. Ethan shifted his weight, glancing at the ground before meeting her eyes again. "I was hoping you might join me for a ride this afternoon, if Mrs. Calloway can spare you. There's a place not far from here I'd like to show you." The invitation sent a flutter of excitement through Lily's chest. "I'd like that very much," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. "I'll ask Mrs. Calloway." Ethan's smile brightened his entire face. "I'll have a horse saddled for you after the midday meal." True to his word, Ethan was waiting in the yard when Lily emerged from the house that afternoon, having changed into the riding skirt Mrs. Calloway had altered for her. 2 horses stood ready, including a gentle-looking mare that Ethan introduced as Marigold. "She's the sweetest-tempered horse on the ranch," he explained, helping Lily mount. "Perfect for someone getting reacquainted with riding." They rode at a leisurely pace, following a well-worn trail that wound through stands of mesquite and across open grassland. Ethan pointed out landmarks and shared stories of growing up on the ranch adventures with his brothers, lessons from his father, the gradual expansion of the Calloway holdings through hard work and shrewd management. "Your family has built something remarkable here," Lily observed as they crested a rise that offered a view of the ranch spread out below them. "They have," Ethan agreed, pride evident in his voice. "Pa came out here with nothing but determination and my mother's faith in him. Everything you see they built together." The admiration in his tone touched something in Lily. "You love them very much." "I do," Ethan said simply. "They taught me what matters, that wealth isn't about money but about how you treat people, that hard work has value beyond what it produces, that family stands together." He glanced at her, his expression softening. "I'm sorry you lost your parents so young." "From the little you've said, they seem to have been good people." Lily nodded, surprised to find that thoughts of her parents brought more warmth than pain now. "They were. My father was much like yours, I think, principled, hard-working. My mother was gentler but just as strong in her own way." She hesitated, then added quietly, "I think they would have liked your family." "I hope they would have approved of me bringing you here," Ethan said, his voice taking on a note of uncertainty. "They would have been grateful," Lily assured him. "As I am." They rode in comfortable silence after that, until the trail opened onto a small valley sheltered by rocky outcroppings. A spring-fed pond glittered in the afternoon sun, surrounded by cottonwood trees and an unlikely profusion of wildflowers. "Oh," Lily breathed, taking in the unexpected oasis in the otherwise rugged landscape. "It's beautiful." Ethan smiled at her reaction. "My secret place," he confided, dismounting and coming to help her down. "I found it when I was 12, exploring where I shouldn't have been. I come here when I need to think or just be away from everyone for a while." The significance of him sharing this private retreat with her wasn't lost on Lily. "Thank you for showing me." They settled in the shade of a large cottonwood, Ethan spreading a blanket he'd brought in his saddlebag. From another pocket came a cloth-wrapped package that proved to contain Mrs. Calloway's cookies and 2 apples. "A picnic?" Lily asked, delighted by the simple pleasure. "Of sorts," Ethan acknowledged with a smile. "Nothing fancy." As they shared the modest treats, Lily found herself studying Ethan's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way the sunlight filtering through the leaves brought out golden highlights in his brown hair. He was handsome, yes, but it was more than that. There was a steadiness to him, a quiet strength that had nothing to do with the physical power evident in his broad shoulders and calloused hands. "May I ask you something?" she ventured, gathering her courage. Ethan turned to her, his expression open. "Anything? Why did you really help me?" The question had lingered in her mind despite his earlier explanation. "The truth, please." A flush crept up Ethan's neck, and he looked away, staring at the pond for a long moment before answering. "Because I couldn't bear to see the light in your eyes dimming each time I saw you in town. Because every time Vernon snapped at you or Martha dismissed you, something in me wanted to step between you and their cruelty." He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "And because from the first moment I saw you, I couldn't stop thinking about you." The simple honesty of his confession took Lily's breath away. "Oh," she said softly, her own cheeks warming. Ethan looked at her then, his eyes reflecting the same vulnerability she felt. "I don't expect anything from you, Lily. I meant what I said about you having choices now. If all you want from me is friendship, that's what I'll offer." The use of her given name, so natural in that moment, sent a thrill through her. "And if I might want more than friendship?" she asked, hardly believing her own boldness. The hope that bloomed in Ethan's expression was answer enough, but he spoke the words anyway. "Then I'd be the happiest man in the Arizona Territory." Their first kiss, beneath the cottonwood tree with wildflowers nodding in the gentle breeze, was as sweet and pure as the spring water that fed the pond. When Ethan's hand cupped her cheek, his touch was reverent, as if she were something precious he feared might break. Lily leaned into that touch, into the promise of tenderness it contained, feeling truly seen for the first time in years. The ride back to the ranch was filled with shy smiles and occasional brushes of their hands when the trail permitted them to ride side by side. Something had shifted between them, transforming possibility into certainty. They spoke little, content to exist in the glow of newfound understanding. As they approached the ranch, however, Lily's contentment was shattered by the sight of a familiar wagon in the yard. Her uncle's wagon. Ethan spotted it at the same moment, his expression darkening. "Stay behind me," he instructed, his voice tight with tension. They rode into the yard to find Mr. Calloway standing on the veranda, his posture rigid as he faced Vernon Zephyr. Martha stood slightly behind her husband, her pinched face set in lines of disapproval. Daniel and Joseph flanked their father, their usual easygoing expressions replaced by wary alertness. "There she is," Vernon bellowed, pointing an accusing finger at Lily. "Thieving girl. Running off in the night after all we've done for you." Ethan dismounted quickly, then moved to help Lily down, positioning himself protectively between her and her uncle. "Miss Zephyr hasn't stolen anything, Mr. Zephyr," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "She left of her own free will to accept a position here." "A position?" Martha scoffed. "Is that what they call it now? Taking in a girl with no references, no proper introduction? We know what kind of position she's filling." Lily flinched at the implication, but Ethan's steady presence beside her gave her courage. "Mrs. Calloway hired me as housekeeper," she said, her voice clearer and stronger than she'd ever used with her aunt and uncle. "I'm paid fair wages for honest work." "You ungrateful," Vernon started forward, only to be blocked by Mr. Calloway's substantial presence. "That's far enough, Zephyr," the older Calloway said, his voice carrying the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "Miss Zephyr is under our protection now. She's of age and free to choose her own path." "She's my brother's child," Vernon protested. "My responsibility." "A responsibility you fulfilled by working her like a slave and treating her worse than your dogs," Ethan said, his calm facade cracking to reveal the anger beneath. "We've all seen the bruises, Zephyr. We've all seen how she flinches when anyone raises a voice or hand near her." Martha's face flushed an ugly red. "How dare you? We took her in when no one else would have her. Fed her, clothed her barely, Mrs." Calloway interrupted, joining her family on the veranda. "The girl was half-starved when she arrived, wearing clothes that would shame a beggar. Whatever you provided, it wasn't enough." Vernon's expression shifted, calculation replacing outrage. "Fine," he said, his voice suddenly reasonable. "If you want the girl, you can have her for a price. She owes us for 5 years of keep." "She owes you nothing," Mr. Calloway stated flatly. "In fact, if we were to calculate the value of her labor against what you provided, I suspect you would be found owing her a substantial sum." "You can't just take what belongs to me." Vernon's face purpled with rage. "I don't belong to anyone," Lily said, stepping forward to stand beside Ethan rather than behind him. The movement caught everyone's attention, and she felt a surge of power in their surprised expressions. "I am my own person, Uncle Vernon. I always was, though you tried to make me forget it." Vernon stared at her, seemingly unable to reconcile this confident young woman with the cowering girl he dominated for years. "Your father would be ashamed," he finally spat. The words were meant to wound, but Lily found they had lost their power. "No," she said softly. "My father would be proud that I finally found the courage to leave. He never would have wanted me to live as I did in your house." For a moment, it seemed Vernon might physically attack, so contorted was his expression with fury. But a subtle shift in the Calloway men's postures, a collective tensing, a readiness that spoke of their willingness to defend their own, seemed to penetrate his rage. "You'll regret this," he promised, his voice low and venomous. "Both of you." His gaze shifted between Lily and Ethan, lingering on their proximity to each other with obvious disgust. "I think not," Mr. Calloway said firmly. "Now I suggest you take your wife and leave our property." "We've said all that needs saying." For a tense moment, it seemed Vernon might refuse, but finally he turned, gesturing sharply for Martha to follow him back to their wagon. As they drove away, Martha's rigid back and Vernon's white-knuckled grip on the reins spoke of their seething anger. Only when they had disappeared from sight did Lily realize she was trembling. Ethan's arm came around her shoulders, offering support without confining her. "It's all right," he murmured. "They're gone." "They'll be back," she said, knowing her uncle's stubborn nature and capacity for grudges. "Let them come," Mr. Calloway said grimly. "The Calloways protect their own." His gaze, moving between his son and Lily, softened slightly. "And it seems to me, Miss Zephyr, that you're becoming one of ours." The implications of his words brought heat to Lily's cheeks, but she didn't contradict him. Instead, she found herself leaning slightly into Ethan's supportive embrace, accepting both the protection it offered and the promise it contained. That evening, after supper, Ethan found Lily on the veranda staring out at the darkening landscape. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly, joining her at the railing. "I am," she replied, somewhat surprised to find it was true. "Seeing them again was difficult. But it also showed me how far I've come in such a short time." Ethan nodded, his gaze following hers out toward the horizon. "You stood up to them. That took courage." "I found my voice because I knew I wasn't alone," Lily said simply. "Your family stood with me. You stood with me." "We always will," Ethan promised, his hand finding hers on the railing. "I always will if you'll allow it." Lily turned to face him, studying the earnest expression that had become so dear to her in such a short time. "I would like that very much, Ethan Calloway." His smile in response warmed her more thoroughly than the lingering heat of the Arizona day. When he leaned forward to kiss her, gently and with obvious restraint given their location, Lily felt as if another piece of her long-dormant heart had awakened. Over the following weeks, Lily settled more completely into life at the Calloway ranch. Her role as housekeeper evolved as Mrs. Calloway recognized her talents and interests. She took over much of the cooking, having learned at her mother's side before her death, and discovered a gift for organization that transformed the sometimes chaotic household into a more efficiently run home. Her relationship with Ethan progressed with a sweetness that sometimes brought tears to her eyes. He courted her properly, with Mrs. Calloway's beaming approval and Mr. Calloway's gruff blessing. Rides across the ranch lands, picnics by the secret pond, evenings spent in quiet conversation on the veranda after the rest of the family had retired, each moment added another thread to the tapestry of their growing love. 2 months after her arrival at the Calloway ranch, Ethan took Lily to the pond again. It had become their special place, a retreat where they could speak freely and simply enjoy each other's company away from his family's good-natured teasing and the demands of ranch work. That day, as they sat beneath what Lily now thought of as their cottonwood tree, Ethan seemed unusually nervous. He fidgeted with his hat, twisting the brim between strong fingers, and several times appeared about to speak only to fall silent again. "Is something troubling you?" Lily finally asked, concern overcoming her hesitation. Ethan looked up, his expression a mixture of determination and vulnerability that made her heart flutter. "Not troubling exactly," he said, "but important." Before she could question further, he shifted to face her more directly, taking both her hands in his. "Lily," he began, his voice steadier now, "these past months have been the happiest of my life. Getting to know you, seeing you blossom away from your uncle's cruelty, watching you find your strength, it's been a privilege." Lily's breath caught at the intensity in his blue eyes. "For me as well," she managed. Ethan nodded, a smile briefly touching his lips before seriousness returned. "I know it hasn't been long and I don't want to rush you, but I also don't want to wait any longer to tell you what's in my heart." He paused, drawing a deep breath. "I love you, Lily Zephyr. I think I started falling in love with you that first day in Henderson's store when you smiled despite everything." Tears welled in Lily's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Oh, Ethan," she whispered, "I love you too." The words, once spoken, seemed to release something in both of them. Ethan's face lit with such happiness that Lily could hardly bear to look at him, yet couldn't look away. When he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch, her heart began to race. "This was my grandmother's," he explained, opening the pouch to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small, perfect diamond. "Pa gave it to me last week with his blessing." His eyes, earnest and hopeful, met hers. "Lily Zephyr, would you do me the very great honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment, Lily couldn't speak past the emotion closing her throat. This man, this wonderful, kind, honorable man, wanted to share his life with her. After years of being treated as a burden, as something less than human, Ethan saw her as a treasure to be cherished. "Yes," she finally managed, her voice thick with happy tears. "Yes, Ethan, I will marry you." The ring slid onto her finger as if it had been made for her. When Ethan gathered her into his arms, his kiss was different from their previous embraces, deeper, more certain, filled with promise of the future they would build together. They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, unable to stop smiling. The news of their engagement was met with enthusiasm but little surprise from the Calloway family. Mrs. Calloway embraced Lily with tears in her eyes, whispering, "Now you'll truly be my daughter." Mr. Calloway shook his son's hand firmly before surprising Lily with a gruff hug of his own. Daniel and Joseph immediately began planning the celebration, arguing good-naturedly about music and food. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, a joyful gathering that brought together the Calloway's friends and business associates from across the territory. Lily, wearing a dress of ivory satin that Mrs. Calloway had ordered from San Francisco, felt as if she were living in a dream as she walked down the aisle of Agua Caliente's small church on Mr. Calloway's arm. Ethan, waiting at the altar, looked at her with such love that she nearly faltered. How had she come to deserve such happiness? The journey from frightened servant to beloved bride seemed impossible, yet here she stood, about to join her life with the man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, their vows spoken clearly and with absolute conviction. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan's kiss was both tender and possessive, a promise of the life they would share. The celebration afterward, held at the Calloway Ranch, lasted well into the night. Lily, now officially Mrs. Ethan Calloway, found herself surrounded by people who accepted her without question as part of their community. The contrast to her previous life was so stark, it occasionally brought tears to her eyes, quickly blinked away lest they be misinterpreted as unhappiness. Late in the evening, as musicians played and couples danced in the yard beneath lanterns strung from tree to tree, Ethan led Lily away from the festivities toward a small cabin at the edge of the ranch compound. "Our home," he explained as they approached. "Pa gave us the land, and the boys and I have been working on it whenever we could steal time. It's not finished yet, but—" He trailed off as Lily gasped, taking in the neat little house with its freshly painted exterior and curtained windows. A small veranda wrapped around the front, complete with 2 rocking chairs placed side by side. "It's perfect," she breathed, overcome by the thought that Ethan had been building this for them while courting her. "When did you find time?" Ethan smiled, clearly pleased by her reaction. "I didn't need much sleep knowing I was building our future." He swept her into his arms without warning, laughing at her surprised squeal. "And now, Mrs. Calloway, I believe it's tradition to carry my bride across the threshold." The interior of the cabin was simple but charming, with a main room that served as both parlor and kitchen, and 2 smaller rooms beyond. One was clearly meant as a bedroom, with a large 4-poster bed that Lily recognized as an heirloom from Ethan's description of his grandparents' furniture. The other, smaller room had been left empty save for a rocking chair by the window. "For whatever use we decide," Ethan explained, following her gaze. "Perhaps a study or—" His voice trailed off, but the implication was clear in his slightly flushed face. "A nursery someday for their children." Lily turned to her husband, and wrapped her arms around his neck. "I love it," she said softly. "I love you." "And I love you, Lily Calloway," he replied, his arms encircling her waist, "more than I have words to express." The music from the celebration drifted faintly through the open windows, but neither of them suggested returning to the party. This moment, this beginning, belonged to them alone. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure, as all lives do. The Calloway Ranch prospered, despite droughts and cattle thieves and the occasional harsh winter. Ethan's skill with horses and cattle breeding expanded their operation, while Lily's careful management of their household finances helped them weather the leaner years. Vernon and Martha Zephyr eventually sold their struggling ranch and moved to California, a development that allowed Lily to finally release the last of her fear that they might somehow reclaim her. The cousins she had grown up with occasionally passed through Agua Caliente, but they kept their distance, perhaps recognizing that the quiet, submissive girl they had tormented had become a respected woman with a family to protect her. 2 years after their wedding, Lily gave birth to a son they named Jonathan James, after both their fathers. The boy inherited Ethan's blue eyes and Lily's auburn hair, along with a temperament that combined the best of both parents, Ethan's steady reliability and Lily's quiet strength. 3 years later, twins arrived, a boy and a girl, Michael and Sarah, who brought both joy and exhaustion to the growing family. The empty room in their first small cabin had long since been filled, necessitating an expansion of their home as their family grew. On the morning of their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan woke Lily with a gentle kiss and a small wrapped package. "Happy anniversary, my love," he murmured as she blinked sleepily up at him. Is it morning already?" she asked, smiling as she stretched. At 32, Lily's beauty had matured, the girlishness giving way to a serene loveliness that still took Ethan's breath away. "Just barely," he confirmed, nodding toward the window where dawn was breaking over the Arizona landscape. "The children are still asleep, miraculously. I thought we might have a few moments to ourselves before the day begins." Lily sat up, accepting the package with curious fingers. "What's this?" "We agreed no gifts this year." Ethan smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling in the way she loved. "I've never been very good at following rules, even my own." Inside the package, Lily found a delicate silver chain bearing a small pendant, a miniature replica of the note that had changed her life. Engraved on the silver were the words, "Run to me tonight." Tears filled her eyes as she lifted it from the box. "Oh, Ethan, I had it made in Tucson," he explained, taking the necklace from her trembling fingers to fasten it around her neck, "to remind us both of where we began and how far we've come." Lily touched the pendant where it rested against her skin, warm from his hands. "As if I could ever forget," she said softly. "You saved me." Ethan shook his head, his expression serious. "No, Lily, you saved yourself. You found the courage to leave, to trust a stranger, to build a new life. I just offered a direction to run." He cupped her face in his calloused hands, his touch as gentle as always. "You're the bravest person I know." The words, spoken with such conviction, humbled her. Lily leaned into his touch, covering his hands with her own. "We saved each other," she amended, "and continue to do so every day." Ethan smiled, acknowledging the truth in her words. "Together," he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that held the same tenderness as their first beneath the cottonwood tree, yet was deepened by a decade of shared life. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the patter of small feet in the hallway, followed by an excited whisper that wasn't really a whisper at all. "Mama, Papa, are you awake? We made you breakfast." Lily and Ethan exchanged amused glances. "We're awake," Ethan called, moving back slightly but keeping one arm around Lily's shoulders. The door burst open to reveal their 3 children, Jonathan carrying a tray with slightly burnt toast and jam, the twins following with careful steps, bearing a pitcher of milk and what appeared to be wildflowers stuffed into a water glass. "Happy anniversary," they chorused, clearly proud of their surprise. As Lily accepted the tray and Ethan made room for the children to clamber onto the bed, she caught her husband's eye over their children's heads. The look that passed between them held a decade of memories, challenges overcome, joys shared, and love deepened through it all. From a desperate note passed in a general store to this moment of domestic bliss, Their journey had been remarkable. And as her family chatted and laughed around her, Lily silently thanked the frightened young woman who had found the courage to run to Ethan that night, beginning the adventure that had become their life together. Outside their bedroom window, the Arizona sun rose fully over the land they had made their own, promising another day of the life they had built, a life of purpose, family, and enduring love.